people do we likely meet in heaven? We would like to meet the men and women of great faith, like Abraham and Sarah, and Mary and Joseph, among many. Yes, we will likely meet the men and women of ordinary faith, like our uncles and aunts and our friends and neighbors. And yes, we will also likely meet the men and women of Christian faith, other faith, no faith, and even the outcasts and misfits of our society. Now, how is this possible? Well, God's grace and mercy in Jesus Christ is deeper and wider than we can ever imagine and tougher than we can ever tolerate and stomach. Jesus came to earth, welcomed us all into God's brand new word. Jesus called this the kingdom of God or kingdom of heaven. So we're starting a new sermon series today for the next 5 Sundays. I titled this 5 Characters We Meet in Heaven. It sounded like another pseudo self-help spiritual books that you probably read and find in some bookstores like chapters. But it's I thought it's a good title to get some your attention. You like that title? So in the next 5 Sundays, we'll look at the Gospel of Luke, mostly. Gospel of Luke in chapters 18 to 23. And in these chapters, we will read stories and events describing a world of certain characters, mostly outcasts and misfits of society, whose life goes through a radical change with the coming of Jesus' heavenly kingdom. And today we will, I'll just lay out just a little briefly about what we will cover. Today we will look at a widow who received her justice. I titled this The Great Widow. And next Sunday, you know the story of little Zacchaeus, a corrupt tax collector who became generous. And then week after, we'll be touch base on a parable of 7-time unlucky widow who has married and lost 7 brothers of the same family, and her fate in heaven. And the week after that, we will look at the book of Isaiah describing the future world where the wolf and lamb will play together. There will be no like playmates. And then also at the end of November, the 2 thieves who hung right beside when Jesus was on the cross, and how their fates, their destination had changed by meeting Jesus. So I like to examine all these stories. There are certain character traits, we will see that, and how their word has been changed, because it will be apparent as we read and as we engage that their story is our story. That their redemption is our hope. And we meet each one of these characters with the coming of Jesus' kingdom of heaven here and later. So today we'll cover the Great Widow. I title today's talk. Anybody seen the movie True Grit? No, you haven't. True Grit, which came out in 1969. I know that some of you are just weren't born then. So 1969, and then in 2010 is an American revisionist Western movie about a 14-year-old girl named Maddie Ross. And it's about her relentless pursuit, chasing after an outlaw who killed her father to take revenge. Now, in the era of Wild Wild West, everything is stacked up against a 14-year-old girl. She's no match against her father's killer, but against all odds, nevertheless, she overcoming every obstacle and challenge along the way. In the end, she gets to meet the outlaw, and with the help of U.S. Marshal, she gets her revenge by shooting him. getting her justice. She's persistent. She never gives up. When you watch the movie, persistent and grittiest character you would ever see. True grit. It's a good movie, actually. It's quite a good movie. True grit. So in today's Bible text in Luke chapter 18, we find Jesus telling his disciples to persist and not giving up in praying. And Jesus told a parable, a story about a widow who has been wrongly treated. She has nobody to advocate on her behalf, so she goes after the judge to get her justice. And the judge would not listen to her case because he is a quite corrupt and unjust judge. But the widow would not take no for an answer, so she is relentless and persistent in seeking and getting her justice. So she banters and she badgers and she's pestering after him day and night. And ultimately this judge, unjust judge, just could not take it anymore. So she gave up and listened to her case and granted her justice. And Jesus, after telling this story, he said to the disciples, you should be persistent in your prayer to God, like this widow who has been persistent in getting her justice. If the unjust judge would listen because the widow's bantering and badgering, wouldn't God, who is good and gracious, listen to our prayer? In other words, what Jesus was saying was that put on grit, because God admires those who are persistent and gritty, and God will listen to their prayers. Be persistent. Keep on knocking, keep on badgering, keep on bantering. Don't take no for an answer. Go after what you want with a relentless effort and consistency until you get what you see. Put on grit. Be gritty. Now in dictionary, grit, G-R-I-T, is defined as the firmness of character. It's defined as indomitable spirit, persistency, and passion for long-term goals. Are you a gritty person? Could be good or bad. Grit is also a buzzword nowadays in measuring success. And it's a key factor in predicting success in school and life, and common characteristic traits seen among successful people. Contrary to common understanding, success in school and life is not based on our intellectual level, but on our character trait. It's not how smart we are, but how gritty we are. According to Angela Duckworth, she did a TED Talk. Anybody seen TED Talk on YouTube? Yes, you know what I'm talking about. You'll find this talk, quite popular talk on grit. Some years ago, she did research among successful students and people. And she was trying to find what separates them from among other people. Among many, she found that one key main factor was that they were all gritty people. Persistent in effort and consistent in their passion over a long period of time. Sticking with their goals for years. Never giving up. Like a marathon runner. Sticking with it. Right? And also there's other articles about the gritty people. There are 5 characteristics. I'd like you to just listen to it and see whether you fit into any one character or whether you are, so they will just measure whether you are gritty or you are just want to be gritty. Okay, so the gritty people tend to have these 5 characteristics. They are not afraid to fail. Gritty people are not afraid to fail, but rather embrace failures as part of the process. In other words, they are very courageous people. And then they are not satisfied with just getting job done. Not like just a 9 to 5, kind of getting job done, but they go after best outcome possible. They are tenacious. And the gritty people they have long-term perspective in life and things, and they follow through. Have you ever heard this, like 10,000 hours of practice? Right? All those genius, well, a little bit of genius, but it's really about 10,000 hours of continued following through. It takes 10 years to get things done. 10 years. And then they are very resilient people. They bounce back. They keep bouncing back. They believe that positive and negative experience will lead to learning and growth. So this is their motto. Everything will be all right in the end. And if it isn't all right, it is not the end. Everything will be all right in the end. And if it isn't right, it is not the end. They're resilient. And at the end, and lastly, in general, gritty people don't seek perfection, but instead they strive for excellence. Excellence. So 5, excellence, resilience, following through, tenacious, and courageous. How many of you have possessed all of this? Like, in some ways. Yeah, some ways. Like, from scale 1 to 10, like anybody around 5? Yeah, I think I'm around 6 or 7, depending on what area it is. It's not how smart you are, but how gritty you are that determines your success in school and life. In fact, it doesn't matter how smart you are. If you don't have grit, you will never be able to utilize your talent. Grit, in other words, grit is a key that unlocks your talent, your full potential. So are you a gritty person? Do you know gritty people around you? Yes? Yeah. Who is also successful. I think all of my brothers and sisters are gritty people, especially my oldest brother, very successful. He will be 80 years old next year. He immigrated here in Canada, went back in the 60s. With minimal education and English skill in a foreign land, with no relatives and no friends, in a very challenging circumstance. He started working as a miner in Uranium City for 3 years. You know where the Uranium City is, Saskatchewan, right? For 3 years, and then as a welder, he worked as a welder and a grocery store owner, and as a business person, he accumulated wealth and reputation and success. And even with his children, and who are all second-generation immigrants, as a dentist, a teacher, and medical profession, very, very successful family. As a matter of fact, all of my brothers and sisters are very successful people, and their children are all successful. Well, except few, just not all, and they're always few. Now, they're not necessarily smarter than average people. They're not. I don't think any of my brothers and sisters are smarter than me. But they're very successful than me, for sure. How? They persisted, overcoming many challenging obstacles, but never giving up. Keep on persevering. Gritty people. Sometimes greedy as well, but that's a different subject. Sometimes you hear that immigrant kids are smarter than average. Well, that's not true. They might be grittier than average because they come from very gritty and greedy parents. So having grit is great for individuals and for organizations to be successful, being persistent in their effort and consistent in their passion for success in their life. A recommended character trait to be successful and well for your grandchildren or your children. Teach them, instill them grit, because they have smart. Now, grit is also a key character trait we need as followers of Jesus Christ in seeking God's justice in the world. Like this gritty widow who kept badging at the judge until she received her justice. We need to persist and even hustling to God for God's justice to be done in this world. Jesus ends the story with this statement. He says, "But would I be able to find a person with this much persistent faith?" Here once again, Jesus speaks about faith, the faith that persists for justice. Now, why did Jesus tell disciples a parable of this widow? Now, in the time of Jesus, women's status in the society was generally marginalized and restricted, especially in Jewish religion and society. Women were respected if they were married and bore sons, but they could only be honored as mothers or as wives. And wives were generally to be confined to the home. In the presence of others, their heads had to be covered and faces veiled. When male guests were invited, women were not allowed to eat meals with their families. All conversations between men and women were discouraged. Women were not permitted to receive any education. Legally, they were still considered the property of men. Their testimony was not accepted as evidence in court, which, when you think about it, not only in that society, but almost all culture and society, even back in 100 years ago, were similar, right? Now for widows, if you were a widow, things got much worse. Without husband to feed or defend you. So this widow represents most marginalized and discriminated people all the time. So when Jesus told the story of widow and unjust judge, he definitely had in mind the marginalized people groups and the unjust system and the structures of this society that only benefit few and discriminate certain people. He was pointing to a broader social issues through a parable of widow and unjust judge, and urging his disciples, on one hand, to persist in seeking and getting justice for the marginalized ones of our society, and at the same time, helping disciples to see by magnifying the wider unjust society. It's a social interaction of the time, and also urging us and helping us to see the unjust social interactions that we see, that we watch, and that we hear all the time. Now, often we tend to persist in getting what we want, right? Unrelenting in getting our slices of pies and getting justice for us. And we tend to persist when we have been wrong. And at times, we need to persist to get justice to be done, right? If no one is rising up, listening to your plea, and then you feel unjustly treated, you do need to rise up and resist. Persist. When no one is speaking for you and on your behalf, you do need to rise up and speak, right? You do need to that. But here, what Jesus is saying is something much more than that. It's persisting to get God's justice for all, especially the powerless ones of our society. We are ultimately called to persist in seeking and getting God's justice, ushering in the kingdom of God here and now. When Jesus said, "Would I be able to find ones who persist in faith when I come back?" he meant, would I be able to find the ones who persist in seeking justice for the marginalized ones and powerless ones, and persist in making peace for all? For justice of God, we are called to be gritty, to put on grit. So last week, in my study leave, I was in Edmonton, as all of you know, and I attended from, not last week, but week before, from Wednesday to Saturday. It was intercultural ministries of the leaders and ministers from Western Canada, there within the United Church of Canada. So we had about 40 intercultural, those people who are involved in intercultural ministries in Western Canada. So I got to meet a lot of Korean ministers. Did you know that there are about 50 Korean ministers serving in United Church of Canada in Western area. Western Canada, and around 100 Korean ministers who are serving within United Church of Canada, mostly Caucasian, like English-speaking congregations, like about 13 Korean-speaking congregations, and most of them, I didn't know that there were that many Korean ministers. I thought I was one unique one alone. What do you know, right? So it's been like about 10 years since I met most of them. So there were a lot of young people, a lot of young, like those who are like 30-something, 40-something. They're younger ones who just came to within United Church of Canada the last 5 years. So it's quite refreshing to see young faces. So we were having this intercultural ministry with other ethnic people together. So about 2 days we had that lectures and some discussions. And after that we had also had our own Korean ministers only to form a network, sort of, like United Church of Canada trying to engage, empowering us to get a network, set up the network. So we thought, there are a lot of Korean ministers who are serving ministries away in rural areas, so their isolation is a huge issue, so we wanted to form a sort of network to support fellowship and do continuing education. So we did that. So on the last day of the intercultural workshop, I got to sit right beside this minister from Winnipeg who's serving Korean United Church in Winnipeg. So he's been there for the last 7 or 8 years. So he brought along these two female women, lay leaders from his congregation. And I think they're like late 20s, both of them. A beautiful young woman sitting over there. So I got to find out that they were, what do you call that? They were same-sex marriage, right? They were same partners together. So I found out that he said his church 2 years ago, this woman came. So I got this permission from him to actually speak to you. So this is like not breaking confidentiality. He'll be watching this later. So what happened was 2 years ago, one person came over to that church, and as you know, Korean culture and society in Korean church, homosexuality is a taboo, right? Around 90% of Korean Christians, not talking about Korean society, Korean Christians against LGBTQ, right? 90% Christians in Korea. So it's kind of a huge barrier for Koreans to join the United Church of Canada. So about 2 years ago, this girl, young adult, came to church, and she stayed, and she got to meet people, and then young adults group, and so they had a discussion, and then she was telling him, I said, I have my partner coming over from Korea, we will marry. And so out of blue, he just said, is it another woman? And she said, yes. And he was like, what? He didn't know how to respond. So just to make the story kind of short, so he got to know them well, and so he decided to actually officiate wedding for these two women who are deeply in love with one another. But as you could imagine, the difficulties and challenges, right, for him and for them as well. But against all the harassment, all the bullying, all the attack, they got married, and he officiated that wedding at the church. I think it's the first ever same-sex marriage done in Korean congregation in North America. I mean, even within the United Church. So just imagine all the harassment that they received. Not only these two women, but also minister, but also whole congregation. they're just keep on getting this harassment and bullying from other Korean Christians for the last 2 years. So he's been losing his members because of standing up, because of his seeking justice for this marginalized two women. And he opened up, and they opened up, and they were terrified when they opened up to everybody. And so, of course, we all encouraged. So out of that, we were having conversations about how can we help? How can we help this ministry who are standing up for God's justice to be done? And these two ministers and these two women are courageous in seeking justice, not only for themselves, but for many other marginalized people who are afraid to come out because of guilt and shame, harassment, and bullying. So because of their coming out, there will be continuing education among Korean ministers and their church members. And so our idea is to do some affirming ministry within Korean setting, because that's a huge barrier for them. In a way, through this widow, this parable, I see God who is showing us and modeling us to persist in seeking justice for the marginalized ones of our society, to persist against the institutional system and structure that tend to benefit few haves and discriminating many not-haves. Put on grit. Be gritty in the kingdom of God. When the kingdom comes in Jesus Christ, we will meet the gritty widows of this world. All those who persist in seeking God's justice for all those who follow the one who has shown us how to persist and never give up, overcoming all and every obstacle, not to seek his own justice, not to take the law into his own hand, not to judge the others, not to take revenge, but to get God's justice in the world for all. And Jesus persisted until his last breath. Jesus, truly the true